Are we ready to start?
Yep, take it away, Georgia.
Hey, hello everyone. Good evening. I'm Georgia Brown, the field coordinator in the Phyllis and Harvey Sandler School of Social Work at Florida Atlantic University. Welcome to this evening's virtual conversation hosted by the Robin Rubin Center for Happiness and Life Enrichment. I am grateful to be spending this next hour with you as we learn about body diversity and how each of us can share and care for our health regardless of our size. Before we get started, I want to briefly introduce the Robin Rubin Center for Happiness and Life Enrichment to show who may be joining us tonight for the first time. The center is housed in the Sandler School of Social Work within the College of Social Work and Criminal Justice at FAU. We offer weekly wellness programming free of charge to our university and South Florida community. Students, faculty, staff, and friends, family, all are welcome and encouraged to attend. This includes meditation on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, as well as special workshops like this one. From now through the end of the October, all of our wellness classes will continue to be offered via Zoom and potentially longer as we continue to put your safety first. We are hosting a link to our calendar we're posting a link to our calendar in this chat now. Also just register for the recurring classes. You must want to try it. You most want to try. You will receive a Zoom link for each class that you can then use each week to join as often as you like. And again, thank you for attending this evening. We look forward to spending the hour with you.
So when we feel most overwhelmed and stretched for time, that's when we most need to hit the pause button and invest in our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health. Then we can come back to our to-do list with a much clearer head, more energy, and more productivity than when we were just pushing through. That's why we really hope you will seriously consider giving yourself the gift of self-care by registering for some of our classes. And you can do that in the link in the chat. You don't need any prior experience, and everyone is welcome. So let's get started. As we go along, please post any questions you have in the chat box. Those will come to the host or co-host directly. So, if you want to ask something of any sensitive nature, don't worry, it will not be identified to the group. Please, we want this to be an open conversation, so know that your confidentiality will be protected. Georgia, would you like to introduce Noah?
I sure would. I would like to introduce you to Noah Warren. Noah is a member of our school at, not our School of Social Work, but our Student Health Services Office. And he provides services to students on the campus. I'm not too sure if he does to the full community, but I can say that he is a registered dietitian, and we look forward to hearing from him on how we can live better, especially in these COVID times. So welcome, Noah, and we'd like to go ahead and get started.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to start sharing my screen, and hopefully we don't have any issues with technology in the meantime. Can everybody see the things? Can I get a confirmation?
Yes, we can see it.
Woo! All right, we're off to a great start. I'm so excited. Okay, so as mentioned, my name is Noah Warren. I'm a registered dietitian. I work at FAU Student Health Services. So for those that are aware of the Boca campus, we are located on just above the Starbucks on the Breezeway. So it's just very convenient. We're in the middle of everything. So if you need to come by, feel free to stop by. So we're going to be talking about health at every size. And, oh, okay, there we go, technology. So I'm going to get into the agenda today. A little bit of what we're going to be talking about is barriers to nutrition and set point theory and what set point theory is. I'll get into what health at every size is, any nutrients that may impact set point, and then other factors that we can consider. I know we talk about well-being a lot, so I wanted to include both sleep and stress management as it pertains to all of this as well. So kind of moving forward. So I wanted to start with a poll first, just a question to everybody to brainstorm. So we have a poll feature, right? Are we going to be doing that? Ashley, I believe you have the ability to do that, but I wanted to take a poll of everybody. So if we across the world ate the same balanced diet and we had access to, clean water and, food and everything was good, we had good rest, our stress was well managed and we had good mental health, we were free of medical ailments and chronic disease, and we met the recommendations for physical activity, would we all be the same size? What does everyone say? All right, we got some poll answers coming through. Oh, we're off to a great start, y'all. Okay, couple more seconds. All right, I'm just gonna lock it in now, and I'm gonna share the results. So as you can see, everybody said no. I thought some people would say it's complicated, but clearly not. Oh, that's cool. Okay, so let's go on. We're gonna move forward. Okay, so next thing we're gonna talk about, if I can actually move the slide, there we go. We're gonna go through a little bit of research and I'm gonna review some of that with you. And that's gonna be pertinent to health at every size and what we will be discussing later. So the first thing is set point theory. Now there's this theory that we when we all practice balanced nutrition, or even if we overeat or undereat or whatever we may do, that we will eventually just kind of default to this set point of weight. So we all kind of, as a consensus, recognize that every body is different and we all have different body sizes. And so I wanted to share a little bit of the research. Please keep in mind that this is mice that this was conducted on. So, I just want to bear that in mind, full disclosure. But what they did here is they fed these mice over the course of days. And as you can see, the red line here is these mice were overfed to excess. And as you can see, over the course of time, their body weight changed, right? And the same thing, we had the control group, and the control group over time naturally just gained weight. And then they also had a group where they were restricted their intake. And so over the course of time, you see that their weight kind of gradually goes down. And then once they get access to food, bam, ready to go, right? So you kind of peaks back up. And the same thing applies to being overfed over time. Over the course of time, their eating habits from being overfed tapered down, and eventually their weight came back down. So I really wanted to kind of point this out, that sometimes our weight may change based on what we eat, or if we restrict, or over the course of time, it just may naturally change. But it kind of sets back to this specific point where they stand. So I thought that was really interesting to share and for us to kind of keep in mind as we move forward. This is another research study that I wanted to kind of talk about. I'm sorry it's a little pixelated. I wasn't able to extract out this table as well as I would like, but regardless, I'm not going to be a perfectionist and embrace imperfection here. So in this study, they looked at students from the University of Connecticut, and they compared them to their attitudes of food in comparison to across the globe. Now, in the book Health at Every Size by Lindo Bacon, they talk a little bit about research. There is an article in the book where they talk about attitude and belief systems about food in America versus like France and Belgium and Italy. And it was really interesting because in the book, the research that they reviewed, the literature, Americans, when they asked, what did you think of chocolate cake? The response was guilt, which I found really interesting. In comparison to our friends over in Europe, they answered with celebration was their term in terms of chocolate cake. And so I really wanted to showcase as well that it's not even just about overeating, undereating, restricting, or like dietary manipulation. It's also our belief system about food and societal norms of how we may perceive food and how that could have an impact on us entering into the space of eating. So in this research study, which is a little bit more updated, they were looking a little bit more at Costa Rica versus American expectations. And so they took these two groups of students and they asked them their concerns about weight and how they view food and the linkage between diet and health. And I think the parameters for diet and health were things like cancer, obesity, heart disease, things of that nature. And so the results were really interesting. As you can see, the concerns of weight were still higher within the US, and also their views on food were higher in the US versus Costa Rica as well. Now, that doesn't mean that Costa Ricans, like in the study, they still had concerns of weight and food negativity, but it was higher within the US, which I thought was notable. But the linkage between identifying that diet can have an impact on health, especially with these conditions that I just discussed, it was relatively the same. So I thought that was also important for us to kind of keep in mind that it's not just what we eat or how we eat, it's how we view food that's important to note. All right, this is one of my favorite slides, the theoretical model of weight stigma and its associated variables. So in this article, they kind of showcase, they try to look at the different variables and its associations of weight stigma and how that can have an impact on health. And so kind of changing the narrative of how we look at health promotion or how we look at health may not be weight loss driven versus looking at overall factors that may contribute to that. So you take someone who may have experienced, say they're in a larger body and they may have experienced some weight stigma, which people in smaller bodies or regular sized bodies may experience that as well, just because diet culture is very prevalent, right? That can be internalized, right? And then that can induce some body shaming, appearance monitoring, and that can have a decrease in our psychological well-being, and that can also have an impact on our health. So I really kind of wanted to bring together all these different pieces to kind of get people thinking about a different perspective on what our views are on healthy eating and health in general, just because, it can be this vicious cycle. And I talk a lot about diet cycling with my patients as well, as how identifying that we're in a diet cycle and when we are body preoccupied, which is really important to know, because that will have an impact on how we view ourselves and how we would like to care for ourselves and how we choose to nourish our body or not. And so I do find it really important for us to bring this into light as we talk about health at every size. Okay, internally. So I wanted to talk a little bit about these as well, because I will later in the presentation, I'll get into nutrition and how that can impact our set point. And so it's really important to kind of give you a little bit of anatomy and physiology as well. So our body is very intricate. It's very complex. There's a lot of things we know and there's a lot of things we don't. But here I wanted to, sorry, my camera blurs a little. But here I wanted to talk a little bit more about our control of food intake and the things that factor in, right? So we have leptin, which is often found in our adipose tissue. And so this hormone will typically signal to the brain, the hypothalamus, hey, like I'm full, like I don't need to eat anymore, right? And then you have this ghrelin or hormone, which is predominantly found in the stomach, but you may find it in other parts of the body as well, like the small intestine and the brain. This is, I call the GER, or the hungry hormone. So when you're hungry, your body is sending ghrelin to the brain and says, yo, I need to eat, give me some food now, right? And you start to kind of think, okay, what's next? And then you also have insulin as well. So when I do eat something that may be rich in carbohydrates or just eating in general, I'm going to see an increase in blood sugar, right? And as this increase in blood sugar, the sugar kind of floods into the bloodstream, our body or our pancreas releases insulin, unless you have a medical condition where that may not occur, which, you can still, that can be treated, but you either take insulin or you release it naturally from your pancreas. And then that's kind of the gatekeeper to the cell. So it's going to stimulate the cell, and then it's going to allow that blood sugar to go into the cell. So then it will lower your blood sugar. And so I wanted to kind of give you a little background of anatomy and physiology, again, as we transition into when we talk about nutrition and set point. It's important to keep in mind these different hormones and how that's going to have an impact on our food choices or in our body. Okay, so what is health at every size? Love talking about this. So I just have one little summary slide here. So like I said, Lindo Bacon is the author of Health at Every Size, which is a great book. It's available at the FAU library if you're interested, which you can check out. So I highly recommend it. If you also live in Palm Beach County, I know that some of the libraries locally have a what's called Hoopla. It's a Hoopla app, which you can connect, you can sign up for your online account through your library card. And it's almost like a Netflix, if you will, or a database where you can get music, movies, audiobooks, regular books. And you can access Health at Every Size through that app. So that's something to consider as well if the book in the FAU library is unavailable. So it's a holistic approach. There's different principles to it. So the first one is weight inclusivity. So it's just rejecting the that there's an ideal weight or size attached to health, which as we did our poll, everyone was in consensus that we would all have different bodies despite our access to food and health and mental health services. So I found that really interesting. And just respecting that we do have diverse shapes and sizes. Health enhancement, so there's different ways of looking at health, whether it be physical, economical, social, spiritual, and emotional. So really trying to strive for these different aspects of health versus the weight itself on the scale is really important. And then offering respectful care. So acknowledging that we have our own biases and our own weight stigmas. And we really just want to foster an environment that's safe, not only for ourselves, but for other people so that they feel more comfortable in the space and addresses some of the inequities that may impact weight stigma, right? So really just trying to create a space of healthy care to our patients and really just acknowledging that they're a human being before they're a number on the scale or their body size. Also eating for well-being. So being flexible with that. And, I always work with my clients in terms of individualized eating and what their relationship is with food and what their areas of opportunity is versus kind of like this stamp of approval of, hey, this is the diet that you must follow. And this is how you must eat in order for you to have a healthy diet. We all have our own relationship with food and body, and we all have our own circumstances that may impact accessibility to food or what our dietary choices are. And so taking that individualized approach is really important. And so I come from that space working with my clients versus, hey, this is how you eat, or this is your meal plan to lose weight. Because, it's important for us to practice that balanced nutrition and being less harsh on ourselves because that won't be sustainable long-term, which I talk a lot with my patients. And then life enhancing movement. So finding physical activity that moves you, that makes you happy. It doesn't come with a price tag of, hey, I have to exercise this way for XYZ aesthetics or to burn XYZ things, or, the intention behind movement is joyous and celebrating your body versus it being more militant and goal driven in terms of the size, obtaining a certain size. So I find that really important as well. We don't get to talk a lot about physical activity in this presentation as much. So I just really want to emphasize it here is that, find whatever it is that makes you happy, because we know that physical activity will improve our sleep. It does reduce our stress levels. It makes us feel better about ourselves. And so just kind of emphasizing that it is important for us to move and to find movement that makes us happy. But of course, if we're saying, hey, I'm exercising because I gotta get to prom, I don't know, I'm just pulling on an example here, right? Like it doesn't make it happy. It makes it that I'm doing it for this goal. And it's less joyous. Again, that's a short-term fix. That's not long-term. And we want long-term healthy lifestyle. And so finding that movement that makes you happy, like for me, it's yoga. Yay. Okay, so here I wanted to kind of take a moment to pause and just say, like I said, we're located above the Starbucks on the Breezeway on the Boca campus. We also have clinics in Davie and in Jupiter. But one of the things that I thought was really cool when I first started working here was that Student Health Services, they conduct blind weights for all of our patients. And the intention behind this is not to hide the number at all from the patient. In fact, you have open record to your notes from all of your appointments that you may have at Student Health. Not that it is open record, but through the patient portal, you can access your notes and everything that's discussed with your provider. And so, but I do find it really valuable because, we then open up this conversation about how you view yourself and body image. And I think that is the most important piece, is not so much intentionally hiding that number from the patient, but being respectful that, one, stepping on the scale is a very scary process when you go into a clinic. For some people, that could be very troublesome. And two, just having that open discussion with your provider about, hey, like I was curious, what was my weight? And kind of talking a little bit more about, because I am fearful about my body image, or, my food intake has changed. And, maybe that conversation, it makes it more meaningful with your medical professional. So we often encourage students to discuss their body image with their provider, again, because it helps the relationship as well, so that you feel more comfortable in the space. All right, so now we're going to get into nutrients that may impact set point. In the background, I have this slide. It's all the different metabolic processes that go on in your body. As you can see, it is very complex. And I love to say nutrition could be as easy or as complicated as you want to make it. But just bear in mind that there are a lot of metabolic processes that are happening in your body that are happening on a daily basis. And it's just doing it. It's doing it. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to overthink it or not, the processes are occurring. So I do want to talk a little bit about nutrition, how that can impact your set point. But first, I would like to provide a disclaimer here, which I think Lindo Bacon does really well in their book. Do not use this information to create or justify self-punishing rules or demonizing food or restricting your intake. So the purposes of this information is to talk about nutrition, to create space of awareness. It's not intended for you to use that, again, to demonize food or to create restrictions around food, or to modify your intake for whatever reason. But just be mindful in terms of your intention behind what may occur after this. All right, so some nutrition considerations. I do want to say that variety is essential to get the nutrients that you need. So you want to eat kind of across the different food groups, across the rainbow, fruits and vegetables. As you can see, the My Plate is there, which has all the different food groups available. Again, we want to use nutrition information to fuel our body rather than making rules around food. So again, what you eat is less important than why you eat it. So I really like to hype on making food choices driven by your intention for health rather than your size. And sometimes chocolate cake is good for your mental health because I'm really craving chocolate cake and I want chocolate cake, right? But then that can have an impact, right? Maybe I say, okay, I had XYZ things for dinner and I really am having this craving and I've had a crazy day. Again, creating space of awareness around food and stress and balanced nutrition. So it takes the significance away of the nutrition composition of that cake, and it allows you to kind of be a little bit more fluid and flexible in terms of enjoying the things that you want, but still caring for your health. Again, the intention is so important. So make your intention driven by health, not by your size. Okay, so I'm going to go through a little bit of the different macronutrients that we need. One of them is carbohydrates. So as with carbohydrates, we have different impacts on our blood sugar. So high glycemic foods, white rice, bread, like white bread, foods higher in sugar in general, like if right, if you're going to have some juice, right, these things are more refined, and so typically it'll create spikes in insulin production. So right, so the high glycemic foods, boom, I eat this piece of bread and it's going to spike my blood sugar. Again, remember that the insulin is the gatekeeper into the cell that gets the sugar in there. So if you have an spike in blood sugar, you're going to need to produce or take insulin in order to bring that back down. And right, and so say we're having lots of white rice, lots of bread, things that are higher in sugar, and that's pretty much all we're eating, right? That could lead to insulin resistance. It's like insulin is working 60 hours a week when it's a 40-hour job. I mean, you got to pay me some overtime. I'm getting exhausted, right? And so that could lead to insulin resistance because the pancreas is just blowing out some insulin to kind of control your blood sugar, right? So usually what happens when this happens, it overwhelms the cells. So that could promote the fat storage despite cells are nutritionally deprived, which means like whatever's backed up, that's going to be processed into fat. But on the inside, they haven't gotten the sugar that they need, the cells, because the insulin was more resistant. It's saying, I don't care about my job. I'm going to do whatever I want, right? That insulin resistance on the inside, those cells are starving. And so then all of that blood sugar that gets backed up, again, convert it to fat. And that could increase your risk of diabetes and medical complications. And so another thing too is it typically lacks fiber. And we know that high fiber foods are a little bit user-friendly in terms of offsetting the release of insulin and how that can have an impact on our blood sugar, right? And so it could also have changes in our appetite. We may be feeling full longer. And so it also promotes healthy bowels, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Dietary sources of fiber, and typically they're a little bit lower, and they're a lower glycemic food. So they're gonna have less of that saturation to the blood sugar and the offset, the peaks and valleys, right? And again, we can talk more about that at the end of the presentation, or if you ever want to have a follow-up conversation, you can schedule an appointment, we'll talk more. All right, fat. So talking about fat. So over the course of the years, fat intake has increased, right? And one thing that we do know is that fat is less effective at stimulating ghrelin. So keep in mind that ghrelin is your hunger hormone, the I'm hungry, right? And so say I reach something that's rich in fat. Yes, I might be getting the feeling of the satiety feeling of fullness from that fat, right? It's not going to be as effective in terms of curbing that appetite or settling down that hormone versus your carbohydrates, your protein, right? So it may promote increased intake of fat. You might want to eat more to kind of give that hunger hormone a little shove, leave me alone, right? And so one thing to keep in mind is that higher fat foods are not inherently bad. In fact, there are no good or bad foods. That's why I try to emphasize that a lot with my patients, that, you know, when we practice balanced nutrition, it kind of alleviates how we view food, whether it be good or bad or healthy or unhealthy. But we do want to create this space of awareness, again, about these different things, how that can have an impact on us. And we do need fat to survive. It's important. So typically people that may experience the deprivation-driven eating. So people that may be following a low-fat diet may experience relapses, right? Because they have such rigid food rules around fat and trying to lower that intake. So one of the things that I really like to hype on is that it's not about the fat content as it is the type of fat. And so in the picture here, as you can see, I have nuts, I have seeds, I have olives, right? I have the avocado and the fish, right? And so it's really important to kind of keep in mind that the poly and the mono unsaturated fat versus the saturated fat is going to be better for your health. It's going to have less of an impact in terms of spiking your cholesterol and having issues with hypercholesterolemia and things like that. So we want to make sure that we're electing more of the poly and the monounsaturated fats versus being overly concerned about total fat consumption, if that makes sense. All right, and then we're going to move on into protein. So protein in comparison to fat and carbohydrates is definitely more effective in terms of getting that feeling of fullness. So one thing to note here, though, is that when I say that, someone may be tempted to say, oh, I want a high protein diet, right? Which it's great to have protein. It's good to have adequate protein. And if you do want to have a high protein diet, we can certainly discuss that one-on-one. But one thing to note is that that's unsustainable long-term, because typically that may take away from other things that may be found on the plate. So one of the things that I try to help is teaching balanced nutrition with having all the different food groups on the plate. Typically something that might be in a lower glycemic food or higher in fiber, something that may have some fat in it, monosaturated, unsaturated fat is important, like I said, or poly. And I gave some examples here. So a tuna and avocado wrap with a whole grain tortilla, wonderful, it sounds tasty. Or chicken satay with peanut sauce and veggie rice could be an idea. Carne asada tacos with the chimichurri and corn tortillas. You're getting some fiber from the corn. You're also getting the chimichurri is made, the sauce is typically made with olive oil. So you're getting some mono and polyunsaturated fat from there. And you're getting some protein from the meat. If you're vegetarian or vegan, obviously there's modifications that can be made here. But, I just kind of wanted to give you some ideas of how you can practice some balanced nutrition. These are some things that maybe you can consider. Another thing to note too is the protein helps offset the spikes of the carbohydrates in turn, like the spike of blood sugar and the need for insulin as much, right? It kind of curbs that a little bit. So let's say I'm just eating pasta by itself with no protein, right? I may not be getting that feeling of fullness. I'm going to tend to probably eat more carbohydrates at that setting, right? So we may feel the effects of hunger in absence of adequate protein. So it's really important for us to have protein on our plates so that we can, again, practice that balanced nutrition, but also so that we have that feeling of fullness. And so we may not be overeating, as that may have an impact in terms of our dietary choices and how that can have an impact on our set points. So try to incorporate all the different things is the point I'm trying to make here. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about fiber-rich foods. So here, with fruits and vegetables, any kind of fruits and vegetables, I don't discriminate, love them all. Whether they're whole, frozen, or canned, just keep in mind if it's juice, that typically it's not going to have the same feeling of satiety, right? Because we often lack the fiber that's coming from that juice. And again, we'll see that spike of blood sugar and then that drop. And so again, so just be mindful of that. I'm not saying juice is inherently bad. Juice is tasty. I love juice. But just, again, creating that space of awareness of how these things have an impact on your diet and how it may have an impact on your food cravings. Whole grains versus refined grains. We talked a little bit more about that earlier in the carbohydrate section. So I just kind of want to show you here, as you can see, the bran and the endosperm are intact, right? And this will be a whole grain right here. The Whole Grain Council is a great resource. I love that website. I'm always kind of dabbling in there and looking at different recipes and stuff. And it really breaks down refined versus whole grains nicely. So if you would like to check it out, you can. But yeah, it's really important here. All of this right here is going to give you some nice fiber, like that feeling of fullness. So making sure you have whole grains in your diet, because oftentimes these are going to be, you're going to get a little bit of fat in there. You're going to get that fiber. You're going to get your B vitamins in there as well, versus your refined grains. They're holding that off in processing, and you might lose some of those nutrients in milling of that grain. But oftentimes companies will refortify and add these things back in again, but you're still missing some of that fiber. So you may be getting the B vitamins, you may be getting, some of the other stuff, but you might not be getting that fiber as much. So you might see a difference in terms of how that impacts your feeling of fullness. Nuts and seeds, again, I don't discriminate. So, whether it's whole or whether it's ground or whether you use nut butter, that's completely okay. There's all different types of nuts that you can have, seeds as well. Throwing that on top of your oatmeal in the morning if you wanted to do that. If you don't like oatmeal, fine, sorry. Right. But there's a lot of different things, even if you're going to have some ice cream, maybe throwing some nuts on top as your topping, or some seeds, just some ideas to give you to incorporate more in your diet. And then beans and lentils. So again, I think I talked about the carne asada tacos earlier. Maybe having some rice and beans on the side would be really great. Or I often will make like a bean salad, and I use that as like a topper for like regular salad, or I'll use that on top of a taco. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with that. All right, so now we're going to get into other factors to consider other than nutrition. So one is sleep. So again, if we talked a little bit about leptin and ghrelin. So one thing I wanted to note here is that when we have inadequate sleep as college students, we typically lack this, with everything going on, right? That could have a hormonal impact on our bodies, and we may experience decrease in leptin levels. Again, that's that feeling of fullness, right? And we'll see an increase in ghrelin levels. Again, that stimulates appetite. So we might get really, really hungry throughout the day. So like if you have lack of sleep and then you notice the next day, you're like, man, I'm hungry. My stomach just wants all the things all the time. And we may often crave things that might be higher in fat, higher in sugar. Again, these are not inherently good or bad things. It's just something that I wanted to let you know, as it is important to get good, adequate sleep. And each person is different, but maybe 6 to 9 hours would be nice. I know with college students that I often work with, they're telling me that they're sleeping 4 hours, 3 hours, and that could have a tremendous impact on their overall health and their nutrition. So I do try to hype on sleep a lot in our sessions one-on-one, and assess that as well. All right, and then stress. Woo, we love it. No, we don't. So stress, right? It's our fight or flight hormones are signaled, right? So as a student, we may be cramming, or even for me, I am giving this presentation. Oh my goodness, I'm stressed. I got to present to these people. I don't know who's going to ask me what questions, right? My cortisol and my epinephrine are boom, in effect, right? And so this initiates the stored energy such as glucose and fat, right? And this floods into the bloodstream, and whatever nutrients are unused gets converted to fat. So like if you have a stressor, stress is so normal. It's all about stress management, right? So when we have a stressor, right? Let's say someone's chasing me down the street and I'm running, right? My fight or flight instincts are in effect, cortisol and epinephrine. I may see a short-term change in appetite, right? I may not be hungry. I'm not thinking to myself as someone's chasing me down the street, hey, let me stop and grab a burger, right? Because all of these nutrients were just flooded into the bloodstream. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And so you may see that dip in appetite initially, but chronic stress over time, man, I really just can't get through the semester. Oh man, that professor's the worst, or I really, have too much financially to worry about. All these different things that may impact a student is really, one, valid, and two, could have an impact on our nutrition, right? So another thing here is cortisol can typically stimulate appetite after chronic stress is kind of present in a student's life, right? So we may want to eat more. And so as we have these nutrients flood into the bloodstream and they're all getting converted to fat, we may also be using food as a coping mechanism to our stress. And that's also increasing the nutrients in our bloodstream as well. So we just kind of get bombarded with this over time. And so it's really important for us to manage our stress in a healthy way so that, we can practice that balanced nutrition. So another thing too is your stress decreases your growth hormone, and that aids in the reduction of fat storage and increased rate of metabolism. So just something to keep in mind. So the growth hormone typically activated when we're sleeping, so it's important to get adequate sleep, right? Growth hormones in effect. That kind of aids, like I said, in the fat storage and increased rate of metabolism. And we know people too that may be doing more strength training based things. This may be more stimulated. So just one thing to know, but there is some potential linkages, which is talked about in the Health at Every Size book, of chronic stress and having an increase in weight. So it's really important for us to manage our stress, not because of the weight, but because how this has this hormonal effect on us and how this really makes nutrition so confusing, because this is a lot of things that we have to sort through as we reflect on our dietary habits. So I want to talk a little bit more about stress management, resources that are available on campus, because I find that very, very important. One is CAPS, the Counseling Center. So you can talk to a mental health professional over at CAPS. They also have support groups as well. So if you may have went to CAPS before and you got referred out into the community, and there's other support groups as well, and they offer lots of resources, so you can always check back in as things come up. Alice Care Health Promotion on campus, they're over at the Smith Center complex at the end of the breezeway on the other end. They offer stress management tools such as stress balls and aromatherapy and biodots. And they're a great resource. You'll always kind of see them around on campus offering Hoot Loot. And you can always walk up and talk with them and kind of learn more about the things on campus. Of course, you have us at Student Health Services, so you can talk to a clinician about any health-related concerns, including maybe you're having anxiety or depression or any other things that may be coming up. We also have a psychiatrist on staff that is here twice a week and offers consultations if you need to speak to a psychiatrist. Overall, we have a great panel of physicians, PAs, nurse practitioners, myself. We have dentistry as well. So we have a really great team, and we're always here for the students and their health and their well-being, and we're happy to see you regarding whatever may come up for you. Campus rec, so again, we talked about exercise a little bit. So just, again, get moving, helps to alleviate stress. So you go to the gym, they have their group fitness classes, things like that. And TAO, this is a new resource, relatively new, which I learned from CAPS. It's a resource available immediately to students. So say you're, if you're in immediate distress and you need to speak to somebody, they have the crisis line, you can call them. We also have the nurses line as well for student health. So if something comes up after hours, you can call the nurse line. But TAO is self-guided. It's a resource available for students. And so you can kind of check in. Let's say you're feeling a little bit anxious and you're kind of thinking about talking to someone, but you want a little bit more information. You can kind of go through the TAO website and set up an account and go through the different exercises and the resources that they have. And then again, it's something for acute. If there's something chronic or it needs immediate attention, again, the crisis line or the nurse line that we have available for students. All right, so I just want to wrap up. Woo! So like I said, bodies are very, honestly, like you all said, bodies vary, right? We're all not the same size. We vary in body size, right? That doesn't mean that we can't care for our health regardless of our size or wherever we're at in the process. I hope some of this information was helpful for you in terms of creating a space of awareness about where you can start with your health and caring for it. And again, not so much driven by the size that you are or the weight on the scale, and more so driven towards I just need to care about myself holistically as we talk about well-being. And again, make food choices driven by intention for health rather than size. Again, you can look at that in various ways. And again, if there's something that came up today that was problematic for you, or you need to discuss more, feel free to make an appointment with me. We can chat more. I'm happy to help. Practice good sleep and stress management practices. And then find movement that you enjoy. And most importantly, be kind to yourself and others. Because this world, we need kindness. Does anyone have any questions? I guess we'll open it up for questions now. And there are my references. If anybody wants to look at the references to the different research, you can take a screenshot or something.
Thank you.
I see that we've had several questions, and I think those have gone to Noah. But before before you answer those questions, we would like to have everyone to complete a survey, and the link is being added to the chat now. Your feedback is very important to us. And we want to make sure that, we provide you with the best, what I want to say. We provide you with the best services when we think about professional development. So we want to make sure that we use your feedback to inform us. Also, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to my chat. Also, just remember that the link is being sent to you. Complete that right now. And then after that, Noah will go ahead and answer your questions. So just take a minute and fill out that survey.
I'm just laughing at somebody's comment. It says nuts are the new sprinkles.
I like that one.
Made me laugh. Okay, so I'm just kind of going through the questions now, so I'll see.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
The question here, it's interesting how as a society we're often told to ignore our hunger cues. I've often heard to drink water if I feel hungry because I might just be thirsty. We did not discuss hydration at all in this session, which I think, one, you bring a good point in terms of creating space of awareness and reflecting on hydration status, but I don't think that it's appropriate to suppress hunger in the form of hydration. I often will assess hydration in consultations with patients. And, we talk about hunger as a normal physiological response, just as a sneeze or a burp or, pardon my language here, or a fart, right? These are all very normal things that occur in our body. And to honor hunger is part of intuitive eating, which is another great book that I would recommend people check into, the intuitive eating book. We also have the intuitive eating workbook. So if you really like journaling, that's available as well at the FAU library, both of those books, which you can access. Okay. This question, what are your thoughts on different dietary crazes like clean eating and juice cleanses? Okay, great. So we talked a little bit about juice, right? And right? And so that doesn't have a lot of fiber. So if someone's using juice as their primary form of the things that they're consuming, that's not sustainable long-term, because you're going to get that feeling of, you're not getting that feeling of fullness. And you also may be missing other nutrients on the plate. So I'm not a fan of juice cleanses, but I'm also not necessarily negating juice in terms of a balanced diet. I've had patients before where they may like to juice, and that's something that they're really passionate about. And I say, okay, great. How can we fit that in to our balanced diet? And maybe we can get creative with the pulp that comes from the juice, because all of that is going to be your fiber. So incorporating that into maybe muffins or bread or something like that, so that, again, you still practice that balanced nutrition and you get an array of nutrients. I don't typically like the word clean in terms of eating, just again, because that implies that there's inherently good or bad foods. And one of the things that I hype on is that there are no good or bad foods. Again, we create that space of awareness of how we can practice balanced nutrition. And I hope some of the stuff that we talked about today alleviates and disseminates some nutrition information so it makes food less scary for you. Because again, we talked a little bit about this with low fat diets, how that dietary rules that may be layered onto low fat intake can create a space of relapse where you might want something that may be higher in fat, higher in sugar, and things like that. So I'm not a big fan of that term, again, because it typically implies good or bad foods, which there are none. Okay. Okay, how can you practice these methods during recovery of an eating disorder? If you are in recovery for an eating disorder, if there's anyone in the group that has an eating disorder, I do recommend that you check in just because we can do a full assessment in terms of how you're doing in the recovery process. And we can talk a little bit more about one-on-one what balanced eating looks like for you and what your process was in terms of recovery. I do find that very important. And I want to be respectful of all people on the call right now and how some people may be suffering from an eating disorder that might be untreated, or people that may not even have an eating disorder, but maybe they're really into dieting. And so if you are in recovery, one, congratulations, and two, check in and we can talk one-on-one more about how you can practice that balanced nutrition, overall how you feel about food. Lots of questions, love it. Okay. Okay, great question. How do you work with patients who have PCOS? Any recommendations for those who suffer from PCOS, who struggle with body image because of weight gain? Some things you can control, some things in life you can't control. And again, being passionate or compassionate to yourself and accepting of where you are in this space is really important. And again, would require a full assessment. PCOS is something very specialized. And would require that one-on-one help. But there are some nutrition benefits to it. Again, keeping in mind having more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables, and getting active and finding things like that. But again, we can talk one-on-one about that.
Noah, could you pick up maybe one more question as it's getting a little late and we know that everyone's kind of
probably hungry.
Yeah, we're almost there. Yeah.
We're at dinner time. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? We're talking about honoring hunger and we're all doing this during dinner time. All right, last question. Do you meet with students only or faculty and staff too, community members, and how do future patients make an appointment with you? Great question. Thank you for asking that. So I only meet with FAU students. So I offer one-on-one both in person and telehealth. So we're really accommodating to FAU students. We have a referral coordinator on staff who can verify your insurance benefits if you do have insurance. They can call your insurance company and check to see if you qualify for nutrition benefits. But if not, there are self-pay pricing available, which the front desk, you can call the front desk and you can get all that information. And you would also call the front desk to set up an appointment. So am I able to, I'm gonna just share the phone number to Student Health. And then I can also share the website for you to.
I added the website for you, Noah, you're covered.
You're so good. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. But yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been a fantastic conversation. I wish I could have a script or a transcript of this because it's really good stuff. But we're just about out of time. We can never have too much health and happiness in our lives. As I hope you were able to learn some new tools tonight that you can start using right away. Noah, thank you for being with us tonight and sharing your expertise and your good humor. To everyone on the call, thank you all for spending part of your evening with us. Remember to check out our meditations and event calendar and take good care. We look forward to seeing you again at the Robin Rubin Center for Happiness and Life Enhancement in the very near future. And good night, everyone, and thank you again for coming.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.